Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Kokeman. I am the President and CEO of the ALS Association Greater New York Chapter. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening for the presentation, Advancements in ALS Research with Dr. Sabrina Pagnoni and moderated by Julia Yasik. The Greater New York Chapter of the ALS Association is committed to supporting groundbreaking research initiatives happening locally and globally. To date, we have invested more than $15 million into the research pipeline, which continues to grow exponentially each year. I am so grateful to Dr. Pagnoni for taking the time to be with us here tonight to update us on some of these very initiatives and the progress being made to bring us closer to effective treatments and a cure. Julia, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. So I have the honor of introducing someone who inspired me early on in my career in ALS research, Dr. Sabrina Pagnoni. She is an excellent coworker. She's an amazing clinician. She is an even more amazing caregiver to her patients and her family. She does it all. She's currently the co-director of the NCRI, the Neurological Clinical Research Institute at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and an assistant professor at the Harvard Medical School. She focuses her research primarily on clinical trials and translational research from bench to patient, and finding, cures for ALS. She has served as PI of several clinical trials with novel trial designs. And it's been amazing to see the development and the execution of the first platform trial ever in the ALS world, of which she's the co-PI of the HEALEY ALS platform trial. In addition to her many other merits, she recently published in the New England Journal of Medicine the results from the Centaur trial, which was the phase 2 Amylyx study, which made the whole community extremely excited about what's more to come with the Phoenix trial, which she is also the co-chair of. Her research has been funded by the NIH, nonprofits, industry, and we are so excited to have her with us today to talk about what's next and what's going on in ALS research today.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here with all of you tonight. I'm gonna share my screen to share the presentation I prepared for tonight. And tonight I wanted to focus on one trial in particular. Actually, hold on a second. I'll share this. I wanted to share audio as well. I'm sorry. Here we are. Perfect. And tonight I'm going to be talking specifically about the HEALEY ALS platform trial, which is one of the trials I'm working on. I'm the co-principal investigator of this trial, and Dr. Mary Sukovich is the principal investigator. And together with many partners, you can see many logos on the slide, and that's because the entire community has really come together to support the HEALEY ALS platform trial, the first platform trial in the world for ALS. And the trial really has one goal: to accelerate the development of new treatments by leveraging innovative trial design and partnerships. So today, I'm gonna take you through this presentation covering what platform trials are, the ALS platform trial study design, why we think this is so advantageous for the field in terms of the science and also the operations, the logistics of running the trial, and I'll provide some trial updates. And I do want to leave plenty of time for questions, so please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me at the end. Now, let me start from the beginning. So the reason we set up the HEALEY ALS platform trial is because patients have been telling us that they don't live on the human time clock, they live on the ALS clock, and that's much faster. So with that goal in mind, we wanted to devise a trial that would be much faster in testing drugs and would be more efficient. And the vision and opportunity really came at the end of 2018 when Mr. HEALEY, a famous businessman who you can see in the picture, met Dr. Sukovich, who became his physician. He was diagnosed with ALS and went to see Dr. Sukovich at MGH, and soon realized that the center could be a place to innovate the clinical trial landscape. And so he gave a transformative gift. The center was named after his name. And that's how the HEALEY ALS platform trial was created. We did some research both in cancer and in the field of ALS to look at the efficiencies that the platform trial would create. And we realized that if we were to test the same exact drugs that we were normally going to test using traditional standalone trials, if we were to test them using a platform trial design, simply by changing the design, we would accelerate the timelines, cut the time it takes to test the drugs in half, cut the costs by a third, and reduce placebo. So I want to show you a short video to explain how this works.
The fight against ALS, the first ever ALS platform trial, designed to accelerate the development of effective and breakthrough treatments for people with ALS. So what's different about the HEALEY ALS platform trial? Instead of testing just one drug, the HEALEY ALS platform trial evaluates multiple treatments at the same time. This means more opportunities to find groundbreaking therapies in a faster time frame. Imagine having to build a new dock every time a different ship came to port with new treatment cargo. This is how traditional trials work. In platform trials, there is one dock to receive all the cargo and connect the treatments to their final destinations.
And so that's the dock that we built over the last few years. In 2019, we really spent all of our time building this dock, building an optimized infrastructure that we could use and reuse to test multiple treatments. And so at the core of this, there is the trial design committee that includes several investigators, Dr. Sukovich, the PI and sponsor of the trial, myself, and colleagues from MGH, Columbia University, and BNI, as well as several statisticians. We have really a great team of statisticians, both from MGH, because at MGH we developed a lot of expertise in ALS biostatistics in particular. So our biostatisticians have run several ALS trials, but we also wanted to partner with the people who are really experts in platform trial design, because we were going to do something new. We were going to build this new infrastructure to run ALS trials in a different way. And for that reason, we partner with Berry Consultants, because they are the experts and they have designed most of the platform trials that exist in other areas of medicine. So we wanted to bring their expertise to ALS. And so in order to build something so big and so new, we partnered with the entire community to design and launch the trial efficiently. At the beginning of this, when we were thinking about the trial, we met with industry. Several companies came to our initial workshop and gave us their recommendations in terms of what would be needed from an industry perspective to have a successful platform trial. Then we met with the FDA several times, and they were incredibly supportive in terms of what's needed to set up this trial for regulatory success. We also met with our colleagues, sites, and investigators from the NILS Consortium. The NILS Consortium is a consortium of academic centers, universities, and clinical trial sites with expertise in ALS. And so we really wanted to build something that would be of interest to our colleagues as well. Most importantly, we wanted to keep patients front and center. And so we have a fantastic patient advisory committee that really gave us a lot of input into the design of the trial and continues to give us input into the conduct of the trial. And so because of that, because we tried, as much as we could, to keep the patient voice at the center of all of this and really listen to their advice in terms of the trial design, we were given 5 stars on the patient-centric trial design rating scale. and also recently received the Morris ALS MND Principal Certificate for a patient-centric trial design. And there is a lot of interest from sites. And we initially selected about 50 sites from the NILS consortium. And then because there was so much interest from other sites in joining and from patients, we then selected a second group of sites, so that the original sites are labeled in blue and the additional ones are labeled in green. At this time, we have a network of 74 sites that are distributed across the US. There's still a few areas, a few states that we don't cover, but we're happy that we continue to make progress and expand to new geographies. Hopefully we can continue to do that to serve patients where they are. Now, the infrastructure has many aspects to that. So I want to explain what that means and why we can do things in a very different way. How come the previous trials were not run this way? Well, because previous trials were standalone trials. So essentially, they were just designed to test one drug at a time. And instead here, we wanted to build something that would be a common infrastructure, again, to leverage the efficiencies of that, which allows us to move faster with less placebo. And at the core, at the center of all of these is the so-called master protocol, which is an overarching or common protocol for multiple regimens. And here by regimen, we mean different drugs. And so the master protocol is like our house that has strong foundations with key master protocol elements that we thought deeply about in collaboration with investigators, the patient community, and our statisticians. So we define the target population that is roughly the same across all drugs that are tested. We define the endpoints, the sample size, the treatment duration, etc., as well as some unique features that are typical only of platform trials, such as the placebo sharing, so that idea that we can share placebo across different regimens, adaptive features, and the fact that this is a perpetual trial. So the idea here, as was mentioned earlier in the introduction, the idea is not just to test a few drugs and then sort of move on. The idea is to continue to grow this infrastructure, adapt it, and really, as we learn more from the trial itself or from other trials, we want to continue to grow it and include more drugs as new drugs are discovered and they need to be tested. So each drug is called a regimen. It's color coded here. This time we are testing 5 regimens, A through E, but we're already working on designing and adding number 6, which is regimen F. And so essentially, if the master protocol is our house, you can think of every regimen as one floor in the house, and that particular regimen will test one drug. And so the particular regimen is described in something called the regimen-specific appendix, which is an addendum to the master protocol that will give us more information about the specific drug. So for example, the dosage, the route of administration, or the safety profile of that particular drug. Now, one big mission that we have is to really share everything that we learn and make everything publicly available. So the master protocol, the foundation of our infrastructure, is publicly available on our website. That's the link. And also we published our first paper as a collaborative study group to describe how we put together and set up the entire infrastructure. So both are available online. Let me walk you through what is, shared infrastructure is and how that would be perceived from the point of view of participants. So if you look at the graph, you can see that the participant flow is as follows. So let's say that somebody wants to enroll in the HEALEY ALS platform trial. So that person will be randomly assigned to any other regimens or drugs that are being tested in the platform at that time. So let's say that at some point last year we were enrolling for 4 regimens, A, B, C, and D. And so everyone had a 25% chance of being assigned to any of the available regimens at that time. And both the participant and the investigator, the physician, would know which regimen they were assigned to. So for example, if one were to enter the trial, they were assigned, for example, to regimen A, and then both the investigator and the participant would know that they were assigned to that particular regimen. Now, there was a second level of randomization after somebody was assigned to one regimen, and that second level of randomization was to active or placebo, meaning that people were randomized to either receiving active drug or placebo for the duration of the placebo-controlled portion of the trial. And as you can see in the graph, there's more people on active than people on placebo within each regimen. So essentially, for example, if you focus on the orange regimen, regimen A, the participant is assigned to regimen A, for example, and then there is a second level of randomization to active or placebo within regimen A, but there's more chances of getting active than placebo. Specifically, for every 4 people that enter the trial, only 1 will go on placebo and 3 will go on active. And so it's favorable from that point of view. This randomization, the second randomization is double blind, meaning that participants will not know if they are on active or placebo for the 6-month duration of the placebo-controlled trial. So each block is 6 months. So people will be on active versus placebo for 6 months. Now, one special thing that our master protocol and shared infrastructure allows us to do is to share placebo data. So what does that mean? That means that the data from all the participants on placebo from the different regimens is then shared, as you can see in the graph. All the data is basically put together from all placebo participants, so that we have a large enough placebo group, or a placebo bank, if you will, that we can use to compare each drug to the placebo. So basically, the orange drug will be compared not just to their own small placebo group, but to the large shared placebo group, which is important because you need to have statistically, from a math point of view, you need to have enough placebos. But obviously we want to minimize allocation to placebo, and that's how we can do it essentially by using this shared infrastructure. That's what allows us to gain the efficiencies in time, costs, and again, reduction of placebo. So everyone is randomized to active or placebo for 6 months. But then after the 6 months of placebo-controlled trial, everyone who completes the trial is given the opportunity to participate in an open label extension. So exposure to placebo is already minimized, as I told you, because of the shared placebo. And not only that, after 6 months of placebo-controlled trial, participants can go on open label extension. That means receiving the active drug for sure. Each regimen, so each drug, is tested in 160 people. And within the group, 120 will be on active and 40 on placebo. But then again, remember that the placebo groups are shared. And so when we compare the drug, when we compare 120 participants on active, we actually compare them to the entire placebo group that's shared. And what do we test? So whenever we enroll somebody in a regimen, then we want to tell that if the drug is safe and effective. So the most important part is the primary endpoint, which really tells us if the drug works for ALS or not. And in order to do that, there's very complex mathematical models to assess the change in disease severity through 24 weeks, which is basically about 6 months. And we use something called the ALS Functional Rating Scale Revised, adjusted by mortality, to provide potentially confirmatory evidence for the registration of a new drug. So what this means in FDA terms is that we're using the preferred primary endpoint for the FDA, which is a combined assessment of function and survival. And it's designed in a way with the mathematical models that would be supportive of a new drug application should the results be positive. So obviously, new drugs would only be approved if the results are positive, but it's, in addition to the results, it's also important to use the right statistical models and the right metrics to measure the effect. And so we're doing that again because we had several preliminary meetings with the FDA to discuss all of this. In addition to the primary endpoint, we're also collecting a number of secondary endpoints that are pretty typical for ALS, including respiratory function and muscle strength, and a number of biomarkers. And so I want to talk a little bit about biomarkers and exploratory endpoints, because that's also a very important part of our project. These are our exploratory endpoints. We're collecting DNA from everyone. That's optional, but really most people are donating DNA. We're measuring neurofilaments and a number of other biomarkers in different biofluids. We're also using 2 smartphone apps to measure speech and respiratory function in the home environment. So these assessments do not require visits to the center, but they are assessments that are done in the home environment. And really, we want to see if we can substitute home measurements for in-person measurements, because obviously they're more convenient for the participant. So why is this important? Well, the number one goal of the trial obviously is to develop new drugs. And I told you before that we have, statisticians who really thought deeply about all the aspects of the trial, including all the statistical models, so that the trial is fully powered to see a treatment effect if there is one. So the number one goal of the trial is to develop new drugs. However, we also have this other goal, which is to help the field, help us understand more about ALS. And we can do that by using the trial as what we call an endpoint development engine, meaning using the trial as an opportunity to learn more, to be an engine for discovery, to be an engine for new knowledge. And so we are collecting these extra DNA and biomarkers and the smartphone apps and all of that, so that we can learn, especially from the placebo group. So this shared placebo group is essentially a very well characterized group of people that we're collecting this from everyone, but especially in the placebo group, if you think about it, it's like a natural history study that continues to grow and give us information. And so we want to use that to learn about ALS and in turn improve not only this trial, but also the entire field. So at this point, we are actually testing 5 drugs. And as you can see here, they have different names. They're made by different manufacturers. Zeleucoplan is a complement inhibitor made by UCB. Verdiperstat is a neuroinflammatory drug that's manufactured by Biohaven. Serum AU8 is a drug that works on energy production and metabolism. It's made by Clean Nanomedicine. Pridopidine is a sigma-1 receptor agonist made by Prilenia. And Trialose is made by Silos Therapeutics and it works on autophagy. And all of them have different mechanisms. And really the reason that we are having drugs with different mechanisms is because we still don't know what causes ALS. And actually we think that there may be more than one mechanism at play. And so we need to have as many shots on goal as possible and really test different pathways and different cellular targets to be able to have increased chances of success, trying to really target ALS from different angles. Now, of these regimens, I would say that regimen A, unfortunately, we already know that drug, zeleucoplan, doesn't work for ALS. And the reason we know that is because the trial also have some interesting and important adaptive features called interim rules or interim analysis for futility. So what that means is that at periodic intervals, we measure the effects of the drug, and there is an independent committee that reviews all of this and monitors for futility. And so the idea is that we want to know as soon as possible if a drug works or not. And we want to remove drugs from the platform that are unlikely to show any benefit. And so we do this periodic assessment so that we can remove from the platform drugs that are not likely to have an effect, so that we can refocus all the energy and all the efforts of the platform on the drugs that are still in the platform, or on new drugs that we want to add to the study. And so as part of these periodic looks, we were able to discover earlier than the final time of the study, the zeleucoplan didn't work. And so really that's important. I mean, while it was a disappointing discovery, it's also important that we make progress as fast as quickly, and that we have definitive answers as quickly as possible. In other words, if we didn't have these interim looks, then the participant would have been kept on zeleucoplan until the end of the study. And instead, by doing this, we were able to move them out and move them to other programs faster. So all of this system is basically organized by the central governance structure. We have a central executive committee where we get input from multiple stakeholders, including the patient advisory committee and the foundations committee. So we really continue to have a lot of input from our patients, caregivers, and also the many foundations that really came together to support the trial. And I would like to highlight the ALS Association, that's really been a great supporter from day one and continues to provide input as part of the foundation's committee. Now, a question that we often get is, how do you decide which drugs to put into the platform trial. And that's the job of the therapy evaluation committee. The members are on the slides and include several ALS scientists. And this is important because we really want to continue to look at the landscape and see what's out there, and what new drugs, what new promising drugs could be a good candidate for the trial. Now, I want to mention that in order to be in the trial, the company needs to submit an application. So they need to be wanting to be part of the trial. And so from the companies that submit applications, the drugs are then chosen to participate in the trial. Again, they're chosen from that pool of applicants. We also have a great clinical operations team. We run the trial from MGH and the HEALEY Center, and this is a group that's really experienced in terms of running ALS clinical trials. One important feature of the trial is our patient navigation team. And so for every patient on the line, I do want to recommend that you reach out to Catherine and Allison. They're available by phone or by email. And thanks to them, we've been able to connect with thousands of people really from across the world. I do want to mention that we have a weekly webinar, and the QR code on the slide will take you directly to the registration for the weekly webinar. In fact, I just finished that just before joining this particular webinar. Every Thursday night at 5 p.m., from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have a weekly webinar where we provide updates about this trial. And that was actually a request from our patient advisory committee. ALS patients often ask, what's the status of trials? How do we find out if a trial is about to finish, or what's the status, what's the enrollment status? And so we decided to start doing this weekly webinar series that we have been continuing now for over a year. And you're all more than welcome to join us on our weekly calls where we provide updates about this trial and answer questions about ALS research. And the other QR code is for the ALS link, which is our research newsletter, in case you want to join that as well. And just to summarize, and now I'm almost done with the presentation, and I look forward to taking your questions. I'm excited that the HEALEY ALS platform trial is really changing the pace of ALS drug development. We opened in July 2020, and as a reminder, that's just after the beginning of the pandemic. And so at the beginning, there was a question, will the trial be able to enroll given the pandemic environment? And that definitely, the patients were really so supportive of the trial. It's really been amazing to see the participation from the patients and from the sites, all the investigators, nurses, and coordinators who really enroll participants at the sites. We've been able to enroll, to contact over 900 participants who signed informed consent. The first 4 regimens, A, B, C, and D, are fully enrolled. That means that we are not enrolling any more participants for A, B, C, and D. And in fact, we expect to have the results. We will be able to tell if these drugs work or not in 2022. So 2 years after starting, we already have the results for 4 drugs, which is pretty amazing considering the size of the trial and the fact that before in ALS, we would have maybe, 1 drug reading out every year. And now we have 4 drugs that are reading out at the same time. At this time, we are enrolling for regimen E, or regimen number 5. And so for that regimen, we still have plenty of spots available. So if you're interested in participating, please contact our patient navigator or talk to your physician. And on our website, we also have a lot of information about how to participate. At this time, over 400 participants have started the open label extension. As I told you before, the drugs are tested in a placebo-controlled trial. However, everyone who completes the placebo-controlled trial is given the option to try active drug as part of the open label extension that continues until we will know the results of the drug. So really a patient-centric design. Results for the first few regimens are expected in this year, in the summer, fall. Regimen 5 is enrolling now, and regimen 6 and 7 are in design. And we continue to accept applications for new potential regimen partners because we want to continue to grow the infrastructure and we want to continue to test more drugs. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and I will be happy to take your questions.
That was excellent, Sabrina. Thank you very much. During your talk, we did get a couple questions that came in. The first of which was, most, if not all medications, even some for the common cold, have side effects. With platform trials, since multiple drugs are being tested simultaneously, one, how would you be able to tell the difference between the drug that's having the side effect and the other drugs? So I'll stop there so you can answer that one, but there's 4 more parts to the question.
Okay, great. No, that's actually a good point. And I should have mentioned that every individual participant only receives one drug at a time. So we basically, from the point of view of the participant, they only receive one drug, any of those that are in the platform trial. And then from the point of view of our coordination center, where we review all the data, we monitor the safety basically by regimen. So every regimen kind of safety reports are separate. And so we are able to tell, to look at the safety again of each drug individually.
That makes sense. So that for that one patient, there is only that one variable. There's not
Correct.
multiple.
Correct.
Great, thanks. And how will you know which drug is causing a positive outcome? So again, that is answered by your previous explanation.
Exactly.
And this is a good one though. How will you know if a combination of drugs could have an effect when alone they do not?
Absolutely, that's an important question. So I do think that for ALS, we're looking at a situation where, at least for now or for the foreseeable future, a cocktail approach is the way to go. Because the truth is that we still don't fully understand ALS, and we know that there are many mechanisms at play. And so we probably need to target more than one mechanism at a time. For maximum impact. So right now in the platform, we allow standard of care medications. So what that means is that in addition to the investigational product or the drug that we are testing, we also allow participants to take drugs that are approved by the FDA to treat ALS. For example, riluzole and edaravone. So that's already, if from that point of view, it's already a cocktail, right? Because if people come in with riluzole and edaravone, then we are going to layer on top of that the one drug that we are testing. In the future, certainly we would want to test combinations, and that's definitely another goal of the trial in the future. But I think that for now, again, we're testing one drug at a time, but we allow standard of care in the background.
That's awesome. And the last part of this question is, how do the above affect other pre-existing conditions, example, diabetes, in potential patients for the trial? So I think what they're asking is, what if it negatively affects how another medical issue for them is being managed?
Right. Yeah, so we do have a very robust safety monitoring, and that's because we have an independent medical monitoring group that looks at safety data really on a daily basis and is in constant contact with sites, investigators, and coordinators at the sites and nurses. And then we also have a DSMB that reviews data from across the DSMB is the Data Safety and Monitoring Board. It's basically a group of physicians and statisticians that review the data, and they are actually unblinded. So this is when we do these tests, as you know, these trials, participants and physicians are blinded, meaning that we don't know who receives active or placebo, but there is an independent group that actually has access to that information and is able to connect the dots. So in other words, they are unblinded and they know exactly who receives active drug and who receives placebo. And so they can look at patterns. So for example, if there is worsening of a condition, let's say diabetes that you mentioned before, they will know if the patient was on placebo or on active. So if they are on placebo, obviously it's not the drug. But if they see a cluster of people, for example, that they all develop diabetes, for example, or they all their diabetes worsens and they all happen to be on active drug, then they can see a safety signal and look into that further. So again, there are safety measures that are built in the trial.
Great. Another question came in asking, what about patients with PLS? are they included? And if not, what options do they have for clinical trials?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So at this time, we're not enrolling people with PLS, but I agree that there is an urgent need to develop trials for PLS as well. So there are reasons for not including PLS in this trial or in all ALS trials for that matter. You know, unfortunately, people with PLS are excluded from all ALS trials, and that's because the PLS is still could be a little bit of a different disease. It's much slower than ALS. It's still unclear if the mechanisms that cause PLS are the same as ALS or different. So, you know, the same drugs may not apply. And also it's because the PLS progresses at a completely different pace compared to ALS. It will be hard to compare results or judge if a drug is effective or not, because the outcome measures or sort of the metrics that we use to judge the efficacy of ALS drugs would not apply, would not be good enough for PLS. So that said, there are several efforts that are not interventional trials, they're more natural history studies. And Dr. Hiroshi Mitsumoto from Columbia is actually leading a phenomenal consortium of people. We are part of that. I know Columbia is part of that, and many other centers nationwide is part of that effort to really better characterize the behavior of PLS and really learn more about PLS so that we can finally do interventional trials or drug trials in PLS. So if you have PLS, I would highly recommend talking to your physician and trying to connect with the PLS natural history study, because that would be the first step to develop treatment for PLS.
Yes, and I would encourage anyone attending tonight that is interested in getting more information about the PLS natural history study to reach out to me either during this session or afterwards, and I will give you a call to connect you with Dr. Mitsumoto and his coordinator, Grace. I really appreciated everything that you could share with us about the development of the HEALEY platform trial. And, you know, now that it's here and we're sitting on our hands waiting for all the results from those initial regimens, can you leak any details about what's to come in Regimen 6 and 7?
Well, I can tell you that we are working on the design, and so we will announce sort of, you know, the more details as soon as we have all the contracts and regulatory approvals, because, you know, we don't want to kind of, you know, share things that may not happen. So we only want to share information when we are at the point where we know the trial is going to be up and running, and we can also share timelines so that people know what to expect. I can tell you that we're working closely with the next couple of regimen partners. So hopefully we'll be able to open at least one of the two in 2022.
Yeah. And another question came up from an attendee about use of ventilators with patients. I did address it via text in a very basic form, but I think that discussing it, you know, is definitely warranted because it's a very common question we get in ALS.
No, that's a great question. So for people who use ventilators, I can tell you that the answer may depend a little bit on the trial, but I think in the context of the platform trial, we can answer more specifically what we do for the platform trial that the trial I just described. So for the platform trial, we do not place restrictions in terms of the use of ventilators, such as BiPAP or NIVs, things that are non-invasive, as long as the vital capacity meets inclusion criteria. So essentially, there is a respiratory capacity threshold that needs to be met for somebody to be included, and that's 50% of predicted capacity. But again, people may or may not use a ventilator at that time, and that doesn't enter into the, doesn't affect eligibility.
Yeah, and I think that the eligibility level for that vital capacity with the platform trial, it was another really big step towards patient-centric platform design that you guys focus so much on, because that was a huge barrier to including a lot of folks in trials. So even lowering that 10, 15%, it makes a huge difference in access. So there's been a lot of great feedback from I know patients at our center about that.
Yeah, many other trials enroll only people who have, 80% capacity or 70% capacity or 60. But again, even every way we can, if we can lower that, again, 50% is, I think, the lowest that we have gone in clinical trials. And I think it's a good thing that we'll be able to lower it so that we can give more access to people. And it, again, using BiPAP at that point doesn't affect eligibility.
Yeah. Do you see that number going down anymore?
Well, I mean, that's possible. I guess, it's all the inclusion exclusion criteria were carefully selected based on statistical simulations. And again, we have a large statistical team and also feedback from patients. And it is a balance between allowing as much access as possible, but also maintaining statistical power. And I want to explain that concept. So the problem is that in ALS, there is a lot of variability when you compare one patient to the next patient. So essentially, as you know, ALS can look very different, from patient to patient. No two patients are the same. And so the problem is that when you enroll people in a trial, you need to set some parameters so that the participants in the particular trial have at least a few characteristics in common, so that then you can tell if the drug works or not. If we were to enroll the entire population or not having these boundaries, basically, we would need to have very large and very long trials, because statistically, when you have so much variability from patient to patient, then you cannot reach conclusions and you cannot tell if the drug works or not, because maybe people may behave differently, not because of the drug, but just because naturally they are different from another participant. And so those parameters are carefully selected to try to give access to as many people as possible, but also keep the population somewhat homogeneous so that we can actually be able to tell if the drug works or not in a reasonable amount of time. Essentially, the people who are doing the trial are doing the research for everyone else, because then, if the drug is positive, then it would be applicable to everyone. But again, we need to have trials that have some boundaries to be able to manage them with a relatively, relatively small sample size and sort of relatively fast timelines. Otherwise, we would have to enroll essentially the entire population and follow everyone for much longer, which would actually delay the discovery of new treatments.
Yeah. And as you said, ALS time is not the same as, general time. It moves much faster. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And I love the analogy you use of the platform trial as the dock. And a lot of people have been talking about expanded access programs. And I hear of them here, there, they pop up one at a time. Do you see a dock being built for expanded access programs in the future, like it was built for the platform trial?
Yeah, so I had to say, we've been doing a lot of work on expanded access. I know other centers have as well. And this is really because our patient advisors asked us to do that. And again, that it's that motivation from patients that really led us to consider expanded access. So I didn't mention it in the presentation, but we do have a program that we call the EAP, or Expanded Access Companion to the platform trial. So essentially, we have kind of small EAPs that are being offered for now at 8 centers of the platform trial. So we asked sites, who was interested in being an EAP center, and based on those responses, and also based on the funding and drug availability that we had, we opened a series of small EAPs. I can tell you that the only limitation is basically funding. And for that reason, we're actually now applying for grants to try to expand that. So far, we've been, these EAPs have been made possible thanks to generous donations from private donors and philanthropy. And now, in order to continue to grow that program, we're looking at grant funding. We'll see if we are successful, we can offer that at more sites for more patients and for more drugs. So it's not exactly the same infrastructure, but we are leveraging that in parallel to the platform trial.
That's great to hear. And I know the demand is certainly there for folks who don't fall into the inclusion-exclusion criteria kind of puzzle and feel excluded from being able to try things. So that's excellent to hear. And, you know, that's, I think, you know, a huge feat that, you know, so I used to work for you, Sabrina,
Yes.
as a research coordinator, and the clinical trial landscape has completely morphed and it looks completely different from just 10 years ago. And so I think that that's a huge testament to how much work and how much, you know, exponential, you know, effort and how many brains and how much funding is behind ALS research here in 2022 compared to 10 years ago, to 15 years ago, to 20 years ago. We're really on an amazing trajectory that I only see continuing, and you've been a huge part of that. So thank you very much for all of your efforts so far, and I can't wait to see what else you have in store for us for the next 10 years. So, you know, I want to open up the floor, obviously, to any other questions that we might not have addressed yet today, because we did focus so much on the platform trial. Or if people have questions more specific to the New York region that I can address from, you know, a Columbia University standpoint.
Thank you. And while we wait for questions, I mean, well said. I mean, the progress has really been exponential. So I'm really optimistic. And actually, Julia, I'm sorry that you left Massachusetts, but I'm so glad you're still in ALS in New York.
Yes, I'm still a Red Sox fan. Okay, so we did get a question here. What's going on here in New York? Well, thank you for asking, Teresa. We have a couple very exciting initiatives that have just started up. One of which is called Silence ALS. Silence ALS is an initiative that was founded by Columbia University and the N. Foundation, but it has grown to include many investigators, many foundations, many centers, and amazing brains alike to allow development of personalized antisense therapy for rare genetic mutations. So folks who have rare genetic forms of ALS, the goal is to treat them with an antisense oligonucleotide, which is often referred to as an ASO. And that is a technology that can turn off a misbehaving gene. So if it's doing the wrong thing, it stops it from doing so. The goal of using these is to intervene early or before disease onset and prevent, you know, ALS disease progression or stabilize disease, you know, that has already occurred, and to not, you know, expand further. So the goal is to delay or even overall prevent disease from occurring. And then if we can't, you know, obviously do that, and slowing the progression once it's begun, which is the target of many randomized controlled trials today, is always a goal as well. So that it only applies to a small number of folks, but it is very exciting. Another thing that we have here at Columbia is the platform trial that Sabrina has discussed. And we are currently trying to get Regimen E up and running. There's a lot of logistics, but we're trying to get that available. And then we also have a couple of other programs. One that is run with cytokinetics, and then another study that's targeted at looking at symptom relief of cramps. So they're not disease modifying trials. They're actually looking at the symptomatic management side of ALS. The cytokinetics trial, that is looking to help with muscle weakness, to amplify, decrease muscle strength when disease is present. But again, it's not targeted to, be disease modifying like a riluzole, like a nedarivone, to slow disease progression. And then the cramp study is something that, we really need to address, because we're not great at medically dealing with cramps with the options that we have available. So that is another thing that's going on there in terms of the symptom management side. We got a couple more questions. Frank asked, I understand that there's a drug called AMX, which may be approved by the FDA shortly. Frank, you're completely correct. And I do think Sabrina is a little bit better qualified to address this question.
Well, we have been working on this program in collaboration with Annals Pharmaceuticals. I don't remember, Julia, if you were still at MGH or not, but I've been working on this since 2016. And Annals Pharmaceuticals has been the sponsor of this trial, working with us at the HEALEY Center as well as many NILS sites to develop AMX35 for the treatment of ALS. So as it stands, we're still waiting for the final FDA decision. The FDA is scheduled to provide the decision by the end of June. So definitely stay tuned. If the drug is approved, as I really hope it will be approved, hopefully we'll be able to prescribe it over the summer, and that will be the third drug to be added to the cocktail. We spoke about the cocktail earlier. I think it's really important to continue to add to standard of care. This time we have riluzole, edaravone. Actually, edaravone was just approved in oral form, meaning that it no longer requires those complicated intravenous infusions and can simply be taken by mouth. And now hopefully we'll be able to add AMX35. But again, at this point, I think that we just have to wait for the FDA's decision.
Yes, we are all anxious for that. And then Adele also asked, can you please specify which sites have expanded access programs?
Yeah, so there's a few sites. So as part of the EAP companion to the platform trial, there are 8 sites. That's only one of the EAP programs that exist. There may be more sites. So I can tell you in terms of the EAP program, that's a companion to the platform trial, where we're giving expanded access to drugs that are part of the platform trial. So the 8 sites, hopefully I'll be able to remember them on the spot, but it's the HEALEY Center in Boston, it's Hospital for Special Care, Holy Cross Hospital in Fort Lauderdale, Northwestern University, Duke University, CPMC, which is a site in San Francisco, and Texas Neurology. And I hope I didn't, if there was 8, that would be 8. I hope I didn't leave anyone out. Again, we do give updates on the weekly webinars. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. And also the patient navigators that I mentioned earlier can tell you more. If you have questions about specific sites, they can tell you what programs are available there. As always, please consult your physician. They should be able to direct you. And both at the HEALEY Center and at NILS, we recently revamped our EAP or expanded access web pages. And so I would invite you to check out the NILS website as well as the HEALEY Center website, where we have more information if you want to look more into EAPs.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, it sounds like you have a really amazing representation across the country for EAP centers. And that probably the closest one to the tri-state area would be the Hospital for Special Care in Connecticut.
You're right. And actually, I should mention that was by design. So we really try to, from the sites that expressed interest, we try not to concentrate all of them just in one area. Or BNI as well in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I knew I was missing one, but basically we really try to offer options, in as many locations as possible, again, based on philanthropy funding, and hopefully we'll be able with the grants, if we get them, to expand to more sites. And really we always pay attention to geography, because we want that access to be available, in several areas, not just in one area.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing to expand options to patients who can't be in the trials, but again, want access to these very promising and exciting therapies. So, with the few minutes we have left, I want to, again, thank you, Sabrina, and Dr. Paganoni, to all, for all you've done for the ALS community. You've really advocated for patients so well, and you've translated that into action in a beautiful and elegant manner in lightning speed in the clinical trials world. I know it doesn't seem so lightning when you're in it every day and working till, whenever you're in your office until, but there are so many patients that are very grateful on the receiving end of things.
Thank you. And I do want to say it's really an amazing team. The academic community and many institutions, both around here, also in the New York area, and across the country, it's really a great partnership. So I want to thank all the sites, and also especially in the New York area, that are participating in all of these efforts.
Thank you. Yes, the ALS community is one of the strongest ones I've ever known, and it's amazing how NEALS, the Northeast ALS Consortium, really keeps everyone so connected, even though we're geographically not in the same spots. So, all right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Any closing remarks, Kristen?
Yes, thank you so much, both of you, for participating this evening. For anyone that wasn't able to have their questions answered, certainly we'll be responding offline in the week to come. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.